Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 SimPilot, and today we're taking a look at another feature that's been missing from the A32NX for a little while, but something that we use every day when flying the aircraft at work. That is the fixed info page in the MCDU. This is a really useful little feature that is probably not too well known about unless you've been flight simming for a while. It's not been in the A32NX, as I said. It's just been added, which is fantastic news. It's quite a complicated little page, but what it does is it allows us to build up situational awareness about the terrain or any other part of the procedure that we're about to fly, and therefore we use it especially on complicated procedures or on approaches where there's terrain around, and it has some other purposes which I'll talk about later on in the video. So to make the use of the terrain, I'm going to start this flight from Geneva, where we've just departed, and we're now heading round to point over to Milan Linate, obviously crossing the Alps in the meantime, which is going to require a little bit of awareness of the ground for our approach into Milan. As ever, I'll be using the latest experimental version of the fly-by-wire A32NX, and I am a real-world Airbus pilot, but none of this is for any real-world use. It's just to give you some extra context on your home simulations. Right, let's get started. Before we get started, I'd just like to mention, in case you haven't seen it, we have a new partnership with Apex Gaming PCs. With me, they've created a line of specific 320 SimPilot computers. We have the Bus and the Manta, both with excellent CPUs, which you can then customize on the website that Apex will build and ship it to you. Use the code 320 SimPilot to get a 5% discount, and you'll also be supporting the channel as well. So here we are in the cruise, having just departed from Geneva, which is now back over our shoulder, and we're going to shortly head right over the Alps towards Milan Linate, a very short flight. But let's bring up the chart and look at the issue presented to us of getting into Milan on the ILS. As you can see, it has a lot of terrain around. It's just south of the Alps, of course, and here's the MSAs. And there's a crucial difference. We have an MSA of 6,700 feet to the north, 5,500 feet to the south, or not quite north and south, but there's a divide here on these lines. And then there's a little note 1, and the MSA drops to 2,600 feet within 15 miles of the MSA, of the LNE. Linate locator. So that's 15 miles of the Linate LNE NDB here. So why is this so relevant? Why am I talking about it? Well, this would be a classic approach where it would be useful to use the fixed info page to draw some of these lines on to help us out understanding where the ground is and when we're going to go below MSA. If we look at the star, I've loaded in the Astig 1 Juliet arrival, so I'll just pin that, and then we'll pin the ILS for 36, and this gives you some other ideas as to what the MSAs can be. So you can take your pick as to which one you're going to use. So I'm going to be higher up on this leg, I reckon, so I'm more worried about these MSAs. So MSA is the minimum safety altitude, sector altitude, there's loads of different names for it, but it's what we're going to not want to go below unless we're sure we are doing the right thing. So we can only really go below it following these procedures, or radar vectoring from air traffic, or visual, perhaps some other justifications possibly. But if you need help with that, I do a video on ILS charts, which I'd recommend watching, which does talk a little bit about what these procedures are trying to do to get us safely around the terrain. So what I want to do is understand the MSA from this little diagram and put it onto my navigation display. Currently, if I'm in plan mode, as you can see, I've just got the green line following ahead. I won't worry about destination data. And then we'll scroll through and it takes us through, and there it is. We just got a picture of the airport. That's the approach we're flying, and then we're going to come up here and fly the ILS. But I want to know when the MSA is 5,500 feet and when it drops to 2,600 feet in this example here, because that's quite important information and it's not very easy to judge. 15 miles from the LNE locator, which is the Linate NDB here. So how can I do that? Well, this is the fixed info page. If you press flight plan, and it's important you press that first, if you're on a different page and you click there, it won't appear. You need to press flight plan to go back to the top of the flight plan, then go to the one left key, and then to the right key, fixed info. And then in here, we have up to 4 little fixed info pages. Doesn't matter which one you start with. Once you've filled one up, you've filled it up. And I'm going to put in the LNE, the Lima November Echo. This is in order to, let me show you a bit more clearly what I'm doing. This is in order to draw the lines from here. So I've put LNE in. Now choose the right one. You see we've got these different options. One is 800 miles away, one's 1100 miles away, and one's 100 miles away. Well, I know that's the nearest one. If you're not sure, you can also check the frequency. So this is the 368 for this NDB. And it's the same for VORs. It's all the same. So we'll click on that. But make sure you do pick the right one. It should do it in distance, so the nearest one should be first. But sometimes there's an NDB and a VOR with the same name, so be careful. Next, I can put in a radius. So I want to draw in the 15-mile ring, because within 15 miles it's reduced to 2,600 feet. So I'll type 50. And what it will do now is, if we look back at our navigation display, to see it you need to go back to flight plan. It's just a bit awkward with only one MCDU, but there you go. And as we scroll through, now you can see that 15-mile ring. So great, we now can tell that within this blue, once we get within the blue ring, the MSA drops to 2,600 feet. But be careful, because of course above the 120 and 260 radials, or well, the reciprocals of those, above these two lines, we will find ourselves with a high MSA, and it's not 2,600. That's only going to be to the south. So it's worth drawing these two lines on. Now, this is I don't like this format of chart, but to be fair, that's just because the Airbus draws radials in a different way, or the reciprocal way. So 260 is the equivalent. This line coming out of the middle going out is obviously the equivalent of 080. So I'll put in, if I go now back to fix info, not following my own instructions there, fix info, and you see radial. So I can draw the radial out, so I can draw those two lines on. So what I'm going to do is put in the reciprocal of 260, which is 080, which will draw my line off to the right. And you can do two radial lines, so that's always useful. The reciprocal of 120 would be 300. So I'll put in 300, and there it is. So now, looking back at our navigation display, once again we're going to have to scroll through. There's our blue area, and there we can now see, if I zoom out a little bit, you've got it segmented. So we know within this ring, which is the 15-mile ring, and below those two lines, because we've drawn those on based on this chart, and as you can see they sort of match up with that little circle there, we know the MSA is 2,600 feet. Outside of it, it's going to be up at 5,500 feet. Now this is normally based on 25 miles as MSA, although do check the chart you're using. So how do I know when I enter the 5,500 feet area and when does it end? i.e. how far out does this circle work? Well, if we're to assume it's 25 miles, I want to draw another 25-mile circle. Now this could be considered overcomplicating it, but this is another option. My point is, if you want to draw two circles, you can't do it on this fix info page. I've only got one option for the LNE, one circle, two radials, and that's accurate to the Airbus. That's how it is. But what you can do, just to cheat the system, is because you have 4 pages, let's put another page in with the same beacon, the LNE, choose the nearest one and the NDB, and now I'll put in a 25-mile radius ring. And if we zoom out a bit now, you'll see, there it is. We have both rings showing. So you can have as many rings, well, you could have up to 4 rings on the same beacon if you wanted to, if you were to use that method, but yeah, you'd be starting to really confuse yourself by then. So I know the MSA starts off as I come in at 5.5 and drops to 2.6, and I can see that quite clearly as we go through the plan mode. I'll zoom in a bit as well. There we go. So we're coming in here, MSA drops to 5.5, then it drops again to 2.6, and if we go north over here, it's going to be very high, 6.7, as we head north. So that is an example of how we would use it on an approach into an airport with terrain around. It can also be used when you're looking for en route waypoints. So we're going over the Alps right now. I happen to know that Mont Blanc, which is the tallest part, is going to be the highest MSA. So I could just type in any random waypoint I want. So I know that's called Moblo. I'll type that in here. And now, there we go. I can see it on my nav display. So that I know that is the top of, or one of the higher points in the Alps, and I'll be able to find the MSA for that. But there could be a million reasons why you want to find a specific waypoint. And if it doesn't stand out, sometimes you'll type it in and it won't be that close on the ND. So you could just start putting rings around it. Sometimes you'll put in a ring until you can spot the circle, and it gives me awareness. So now I'm within range of Moblo, which will be just over here somewhere. Sticking up and in the way of our safe flight, although we are obviously above it at 24,000 feet. But there you go. So this is another useful feature of the fix info page. As you can see, you can start to get some quite fancy drawings on your navigation display if you're not careful. It does take a bit of decluttering. When you're in the climb, after takeoff, you might use these on a departure, and there's a thing we do at 10,000 feet which is often called clear and copy, which would include clearing out the RadNav page, and you might want to clear out all your old fixes, because these would stay in here until the approach unless you change them to something different. They will clear after the flight though. So when you land, the FMGC resets to a new flight, and these will all be dumped at that point. Something else we can do with this page, just to keep showing you the flexibility of it, is the go around from Milan has a right turn, obviously, because we know the mountains are to the north. So you can see we need to follow from the Linate VOR, LIN, we need to follow the radial 105. Now we initially fly straight ahead to 2.5, then make the right turn. But for situational awareness, pilots might choose to, let's get rid of that outer ring, because I think that's extra clutter really, but let's choose to draw that on. So that is the LIN 11225. So type in LIN, it'll bring us a list. And 11225, it's also the closest. But you'll see that there's Lin B, and there's, well, I'm not sure what that is actually, but yeah, there's other ones around the world. But don't accidentally click on the wrong one. It has happened, obviously. And then it's the radial 105, so I'll put 105 radial. And now, if I go back to plan, flight plan, as we get to the airport, you can see here that if we go around, I know that I'm going to go straight ahead and I'm going to come back and intercept this blue line outbound. But this is where the clutter starts to become an issue. You can see my MSA lines could potentially get confusing if we were to do that. But it could be an airport where you're flying an approach where you draw this line on anyway, and you wouldn't have to draw the others on, you know. So it's a flexible thing. There's no hard and fast rules with the fixed info page. It is entirely there for the pilots to build up a picture that works for them. It allows us to draw the bits we think are important or that we're worried about, and the two pilots together will come up with a plan and draw it onto the navigation display, and you've got to both know what you've put on there. So remember, these are shared, so the first officer side is going to have the same lines drawn on it. There's only 4 and they're not different, they are joined. Both navigation displays will have the same fixed info pages, so it's important that you all know what you've drawn on there, otherwise you might end up going around and following the wrong blue line or something like that. So again, as ever, requires thought and briefing, and can't just be done single pilot. Nothing in the Airbus can. Other personal classic use cases for me are, let's say we had a long cruise now, and over the top waypoint, the top VOR, I wanted to do a fuel check. But then there are a few ways you can do it, but I've done it again. I would put in potentially, if I was concerned about missing it for any reason, I'd put in top and a little ring around it, and that way, there you go, 63 miles. Put a radius around it, and that way I just know that that's a waypoint where I was expecting to do a fuel check. Things like that. There's another way to use it during the en route. It's also helpful for air traffic saying report at a waypoint. You could highlight it like this, or do something else to remind you that you need it. You'll notice Moblo stays on there, and even if we didn't have any range ring, you don't have to put a range ring on it. If we find Moblo, it's on the 3rd page, get rid of that ring, you'll still get the Moblo point because I've highlighted it. So where that's useful is if you're flying a departure that has an emergency turn. So if you're taking off and your engine fails and you cannot fly the SID safely, for example, leaving Milan Linate because it points at the mountains, then you can use these to highlight the waypoints you'd fly to instead. So if Moblo was a point we needed to use, then now I can see it. So to give you some other ideas as to what you might want to do with this page, just to give you some more examples, Larnaca has an RLS, procedural RLS that they fly quite often. It's on an unusual airport for that you actually fly the full procedure. As you can see here, you come to the Larnaca VOR and then you head outbound 062 to 8 miles. So lo and behold, you could put in the Larnaca VOR as a fix and put the 062 radial in, and it will draw it on, and you have that nice blue line to follow. And then you could also put in an 8-mile range ring, and then you'll know, all right, I'm following out to there and then turning. Now, again, I have videos on tracking needles and flying these sorts of approaches. You're not actually using it for anything. It is just to help build up some awareness. Worst case, maybe you've lost your GPS or something like that. Just in case something else happens, you could use it. But remember, it is just drawn on the map. It's not a definitive form of navigation. I still need to actually have the VORs displayed and selected to start flying a VOR approach. You couldn't draw it on here and then follow the blue lines. This helps with MSAs, as you'll see that we don't have the terrain option at the moment in the A32NX, but we don't actually use that terrain page for navigating ever. It's just an awareness thing, and more important would be these range rings and so on where we know the MSAs. So that is an important point to note, that this terrain display, when it does work, is not actually a way we can navigate. You couldn't fly through a valley using it because it's just not that accurate. It's not designed for that. One final example I've got for you, quite a common one, is if you're in Edinburgh, for example, Echo Golf Papa Hotel, and you wanted to fly a visual approach during the day, there are some restrictions on it. And if we go to here, visual approaches for runway 24, well, yes, we're in a heavy aircraft, etc. But what it does say is all visual approaches from the south to runway 24 by aircraft in excess of 5,700 kilograms, or max takeoff weight, are to be made from a position not less than 7 DME on the extended centre line. So that means if we were flying to Edinburgh, we'd have to fly our approach and be within, fly it from turning final outside 7 miles. So we don't want to fly within 7 miles. So to do that, we could simply, let's pretend that Milan has the same restriction. It doesn't, but pretend it did. So I could put in Milan. In fact, no, that's wrong. Remember, you can put in, it's just like the progress page, you can put in the actual runway. So I can put Milan Linate, LIML, runway 36, type it in. And now, 7 miles, I put in a 7-mile ring. And let's clear out the others just to make it a bit more clear. Good. And we'll go to plan, zoom in. And there's my 7-mile ring. So if we were visual and we were carving across the sort of cross country over here instead of following our green line, then I would know that I need to turn final outside this blue line. If I'm pointing in towards it too much, then it's no good. I also would know at 7 miles, let's say I could brief that I want to be 7 miles at 2,000 feet. Perfectly reasonable place to be. So if we were descending and I had a level off arrow, I would put my level off arrow somewhere around there. For example, if I was using vertical speed instead of hand flying. So there's loads of different uses, but it's just great for situational awareness. Likewise, I might brief in my, say for this ILS approach, we're going to fly into Milan. I could say to the other pilot, I'm going to put the wheels down at 5 miles. So I would put in a 5-mile ring. And then we'll both know as we pass that blue line, it's a very clear marker. Oh, yeah, a reminder we need to put the gear down. Things like that. Now, I don't do that very often, that blue ring, but there are some reasons, especially visual approaches, where they're going to be extra useful for that. But I mainly use them for the terrain and for emergency turns and those radials that can be useful. Some airports will say don't go beyond a 7-mile arc from the VOR. Things like that. All more examples of when you would draw it on. I could talk all day really because there's just a million different use cases. It's really useful, but as I said, it is not definitive. There are no rules on it. It is used for the pilots together, must be together, to build up their situational awareness of what they're about to do and come up with a plan. So that's all for today's video. I hope it's been interesting for you. It's a really, really nice feature. So again, a massive thank you to the fly-by-wire team for putting the time and effort into making that become a reality in the A32NX. It is used all the time. I'll be using it on my streams, no doubt, as we fly into different airports to help build up a bit of awareness, especially when you're going somewhere unfamiliar. It can be extra useful for that. And I look forward to trying out all the other sort of different style approaches that we can now do with a bit more situational awareness. There'll be plenty more guides like this, tutorials and live streams coming on the channel, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see more. Otherwise, we'll see you again in another of those videos or live streams very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.